The June sun beat down on our training camp at Fort Benning, Georgia. I adjusted my uniform for the last time before graduation, feeling the weight of the badge that would soon be officially mine. 6 years of military academy culminated in that moment. My name is Daniela Soares, the first in my family to pursue a military career, the daughter of Brazilian immigrants who arrived in the United States when I was just 5 years old. Soares, Drill Sergeant Pierce's voice cut through the air like a whip. Colonel Hughes wants to speak with you. Now, my stomach sank. Colonel Hughes was a living legend at Fort Benning, known as much for his impressive record in Afghanistan as for his unpredictable temper. I'd only seen him from afar throughout my training. Yes, sir, I replied automatically, heading for the administrative building. The colonel's office was like him, austere and intimidating. Flags, medals, and photographs of military operations covered the walls. Behind an imposing oak desk, Colonel Hughes watched me with eyes that seemed to read my every thought. "Cadet Soares," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I've been following your performance. Impressive." "Thank you, sir," I replied, maintaining my composure. "I have a peculiar situation and need someone with your profile." He paused, studying my reaction. My nephew, Lieutenant Ryan Hughes, was supposed to participate in the combat demonstration today, but something unexpected happened. "You'll be filling in." It wasn't uncommon for cadets to replace officers in demonstrations. It was even an honor. But something in the colonel's expression bothered me. "Would Lieutenant Ryan be in the attack or defense squadron, sir?" A thin smile appeared on the colonel's lips. "Attack. You'll be on the front lines, Soares. Show us what you're capable of." A simple nod was all I could think of. As I left the office, an inexplicable weight settled on my shoulders. Fort Benning's graduation ceremony was famous for its tactical demonstration. 2 teams simulated a firefight using blank ink. It was impressive, perfectly choreographed in a tradition dating back decades. In the locker room, as I was getting ready, Lieutenant Martinez approached. He was one of the few officers with whom I had developed a close relationship during training. "Soares, I heard you're replacing Ryan Hughes today." His voice betrayed concern. "Yes, sir. The colonel just told me." Martinez looked around, making sure we were alone. "Be careful. The colonel and Ryan have history, and it's not a good one." "Like this?" "Ryan is the colonel's sister's son. He joined the army against the colonel's wishes and has distinguished himself on his own merit. This angers Hughes." I frowned. "Why would that bother you? Shouldn't that be a source of pride?" Martinez shrugged. "The colonel wanted Ryan to follow in his exact footsteps. Military intelligence, like him. But Ryan chose infantry. It's complicated." Hesitated. "Just stay alert today, okay?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand the warning. The demonstration field was packed. Family members, high-ranking officers, and even some local politicians filled the stand. Our squadron positioned itself for the start of the simulation. I could feel Colonel Hughes's gaze on me from the main stage. "Remember," Captain Wilson instructed us, "it's all choreographed. Follow it exactly as we rehearse. The ammunition is blank, but still, safety." First, when the demonstration began, we fell into perfect formation. The roar of rifles filled the air as we advanced across the simulated terrain. I led the left flank, just as Lieutenant Ryan. It was in the 3rd minute that everything changed. A distinct crack cut through the air. Not the muffled sound of blank ammunition, but the sharp, unmistakable crack of a live round. I felt the wind blow past inches from my face, followed by the sound of it impacting the concrete wall behind me. Time seemed to freeze. I looked at my companions, trying to understand. Some continued the demonstration, oblivious. Others, more experienced, had already noticed the anomaly and began to crouch. "Cease fire." Captain Wilson's voice thundered across the field. But another shot rang out, and this time I felt a hot sting on my left arm. The bullet had grazed, tearing the fabric of my uniform and leaving a red trail on my skin. Chaos ensued. Cadets and officers scrambled for cover. Contradictory orders were shouted. On the platform I saw Colonel Hughes standing impassive, observing everything with a look I couldn't decipher. Lieutenant Martinez was the first to reach. "Are you okay?" he asked, examining my wound. "I am," I replied, still in shock. "What's going on?" "Someone substituted live ammunition for blanks," he muttered, his face pale. "And I have a good idea who did it." The ceremony was abruptly interrupted. We were all escorted into the buildings while a searched the premises. My wound was treated in the infirmary, a superficial cut that didn't even require stitches. As the nurse applied the bandage, the door opened and Colonel Hughes walked in. His face was a perfectly practiced mask of concern. "Cadet Sores, I deeply regret what happened," he said, his voice thick with false sincerity. "A thorough investigation will be conducted to identify whoever is responsible for this terrible security breach." I looked him straight in the eye, with all due respect, sir, it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. An icy silence filled the room. The nurse, sensing the tension, muttered something about getting more supplies and quickly left. The colonel's smile faded. "Be careful with your accusations, cadet. They could jeopardize a promising career." "The bullet was for your nephew, wasn't it?" I asked, surprised at my own audacity. The colonel approached, bowing slightly. "You don't understand how this world works, Sores. Some lessons need to be taught the old-fashioned way. Ryan needs to learn his place. So you admit it?" He laughed, a cold, calculated sound. "Old school, Sores. That's how we make true soldiers." A little lesson in humility for my arrogant nephew. Who would have thought you'd end up in his place? He adjusted his jacket. "Just a little scare. Nothing serious. But it looks like the shot went ... slightly astray." My blood ran cold. The colonel had deliberately arranged for a live bullet to be used in the demonstration, hoping to scare his own nephew. "That's a crime, sir," I managed to say. "Prove it," he replied simply, heading for the... "Oh, and congratulations on your graduation, Cadet Sir. Welcome to the true United States Army." When the door closed, I realized my military career had begun very differently than I'd imagined. This was not the army of honor and integrity I had dreamed of serving in. That night, alone in my barracks, I made a decision. Colonel Hughes could not remain untouched after putting lives at risk for petty revenge against his own nephew. The hard part would be proving it and surviving the retaliation that would certainly come. In the following days, an internal investigation was launched. As expected, Major Donovan of the Army Criminal Investigation Department was assigned to the case. We knew his reputation, incorruptible and meticulous. "Cadet Sores," he called me 3 days after the incident. "I need your statement." In a small, austere room, I recounted exactly what had happened, including my private conversation with Colonel Hughes in the infirmary. "Are you telling me the colonel admitted to organizing this?" Donovan asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes, sir. He said it was an old school lesson for his nephew, that the shot had gone slightly wide." Donovan took detailed notes. "No witnesses to this conversation, I presume?" "No, sir. We were alone." The major sighed. "I see. Does anyone else know about your ... suspicion?" I hesitated. Mentioning Martinez might put him at risk. "No, sir. I just suspected it because of the colonel's reaction to the incident." "Cadet Sores," Donovan's leaning forward, "do you understand the gravity of these allegations? Colonel Hughes has 30 years of exemplary service, 3 Silver Stars, and connections in Washington that would make a senator tremble." "I understand, sir. But I also understand the gravity of using live ammunition in a demonstration. Teach a lesson." The major studied me for a long moment. "I'll investigate thoroughly, Cerise, but without concrete evidence, well, you understand how it works." I left the interview with a sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew the word of a newly graduated cadet against a decorated colonel wouldn't be worth much. I needed proof. That afternoon, I sought out Lieutenant Ryan Hughes at the base hospital, where he was hospitalized with appendicitis, the unforeseen event that had prevented him from participating in the demonstration. Jade looked a lot like his uncle, physically tall, with thinning dark hair, piercing eyes, but there was a different aura about him, more approachable, less intimidating. "Cadet Sores," he greeted me as I entered his room. "I heard you replaced me in the demonstration, and that there was an ... incident." "Yes, sir," I replied, closing the door behind me. "That's what I'd like to talk about." I told him everything: the last-minute substitution, the live fire, my conversation with the colonel. Ryan listened without interrupting, his face gradually changing from surprise to suppressed anger. "My uncle was always a stern man," he finally spoke. "But this is another level. Do you think he would be capable?" I asked directly. Ryan ran a hand over his face. "We've been a military family for 5 generations, Sores. My grandfather was a general, as was my great-grandfather. When I chose infantry over intelligence, like him, it was almost sacrilege. He paused. But trying to kill me? No, he wouldn't go that far. Scare, maybe. Humiliate, certainly. But not kill. The bullet passed inches from my head, sir. And that's the disturbing thing, Ryan agreed. My uncle is an excellent shot. If he was just trying to scare, the bullet wouldn't have gone so close. A terrible possibility began to form in my mind. What if the goal wasn't just to scare you? What if ... double quotes, permanently remove the family's disappointment? Ryan added, his voice low. It's a terrible thought, Suresh, but I've known my uncle for 28 years. He's ruthless, but not a murderer. With all due respect, sir, someone switched live ammunition for blanks and fired deliberately. If it wasn't the colonel, who was it? Ryan was silent. There's something you need to know. My uncle isn't just a colonel. He has deep connections to sectors of intelligence that don't even appear in official records. People who would do anything for him. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you suggest we do, sir? Nothing right now, Ryan replied. Let Donovan lead his investigation. He's good at what he does. In the meantime, keep your eyes open and your head down. If my uncle really is behind this, you're already on his radar. Leaving the hospital, I felt as if I had entered territory far more dangerous than any combat zone I could ever be sent to. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation progressed slowly. I was officially commissioned a second lieutenant, but the shadow of the incident loomed large over my achievement. Rumors swirled around the base, and I noticed stares and whispers following me through the hallways. Lieutenant Martinez remained a discreet ally, sharing with me whatever information he could gather. Ballistics analysis confirmed it. It was an M24, the standard sniper rifle he informed me during a morning physical training session, and the ammunition was 7.62mm military. Nothing easily traceable. Any clues as to who fired the shot? I asked, keeping my voice low as we ran. Nothing official, but there are rumors about a sergeant on the colonel's personal security deal, a guy named Becker. He was transferred yesterday to a base in Alaska. Emergency transfer. They say removing witnesses, I muttered. Or simply coincidence, Martinez replied, ever cautious. Donovan continues to investigate, but he's facing obstacles. Documents disappearing, witnesses suddenly not remembering, the usual when you mess with someone powerful. That afternoon, I received my first official assignment, to escort a supply convoy to a training base in Tennessee. A simple mission, fitting for a newly commissioned officer. Or so it seemed. On the morning of departure, while checking the vehicles, a young female soldier approached me. I didn't recognize her from my training days. Lieutenant Cerez? She asked, handing me an envelope. From Lieutenant Hughes. I opened the envelope as soon as she walked away. Inside was just a note with a short message. Don't go. It's a trap. Meet us at the usual place at 10 p.m. I was confused. What usual place? I'd never met Ryan outside the hospital. I looked at the envelope again, noticing a small symbol in the corner, the emblem of Martinez's class at the military academy. At 10 p.m., I discreetly made my way to the abandoned shooting range where Martinez and I sometimes practiced after hours. As you'd suspect, he was there, along with Ryan, now recovered from surgery. Sorry about the cryptic note, Ryan said immediately. We couldn't risk being more explicit. What's going on? I asked. Why do they say my mission is a trap? Martinez and Ryan exchanged glances. It was Martinez who spoke. The route your train would take passes through a remote area in the mountain, perfect for a surprise training ambush, which coincidentally could result in a real casualty, Ryan added. Specifically, you. I felt my stomach sink. How did you find out about this? I have my own intelligence contacts, Ryan explained. Not all of them are loyal to my uncle. A plan has been devised for an unannounced exercise involving his convoy, with live ammunition again. But this is crazy, I stammered. Why does he want me dead? I'm just a rookie lieutenant, because you know too much, Martinez replied. And because, according to my sources, you weren't the only one making accusations. Major Donovan is gathering concrete evidence against the colonel? Ryan nodded. My uncle is cornered, and people like that are most dangerous when cornered. He needs to eliminate witnesses and discredit the investigation. What do you suggest I do? Refusing to go would be insubordination. We've already taken care of it, Martinez said. You've been officially reassigned to special training at Fort Bragg, at the request of Special Operations Command. The paperwork was processed an hour ago. Fort Bragg? I repeated, surprised. But I'm not qualified for it. It's just a cover, Ryan interrupted. Actually, you're meeting with FBI agents in Washington. They've been investigating my uncle for months on other issues. Your testimony could be crucial. The reality of the situation finally hit me in its full magnitude. Are we really facing a decorated colonel? Someone with connections in Washington? It's bigger than that, Ryan said, his voice grave. We believe my uncle is involved in a network of high-ranking officials who have manipulated operations, embezzled funds, and even influenced political decisions for their own benefit. The incident with you was just the tip of the iceberg, the first concrete evidence of their actions that couldn't be easily covered up. Why tell me all this? Why take the risk? Ryan smiled sadly. Because honorable military personnel don't shoot their own soldiers to send messages. Because I swore an oath to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And because, unlike my uncle, I still believe in the values this uniform represents. That night, I left Fort Benning in an unmarked vehicle, accompanied by an undercover FBI agent. My carefully planned military career had taken a completely unexpected turn before it had even begun. Washington, D.C. was a world apart from the military life I knew. The FBI office I was taken to had plush carpets and meeting rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows offering stunning views of the National Mall. Special Agent Catherine Vance greeted me with a firm handshake. Lieutenant Cerez, thank you for coming. I know this decision wasn't easy. It was quite simple, actually, ma'am, I replied. Someone tried to kill me. Vance gave a half smile. Straight to the point. I like that. She gestured for me to follow her. Let's talk somewhere more private. She led me to a smaller room, where maps and photographs covered one wall. I recognized Colonel Hughes in many of them, often alongside figures I knew to be important in Washington, including several senators and high-ranking Pentagon officials. We've been investigating what we call Operation Patriarch for almost 2 years, Vance explained, pointing to the central map. A group of high-ranking military officers and their civilian associates who have formed a sort of shadow government within our defense establishment. Like a conspiracy? I asked incredulously. We prefer the term illicit influence network, Vance corrected. They don't plot to overthrow the government. They manipulate military contracts, influence strategic appointments, control the flow of certain intelligence, and occasionally interfere in specific operations to benefit themselves or their allies. And Colonel Hughes is part of that. He's not just part of it, Vance said, touching the central photo. We believe he's one of the key architects. His great-uncle helped found the group in the 1960s during the Cold War. The scale of the situation stunned me. I expected corruption, perhaps abuse of power, but this was almost unimaginable. What does my ... incident have to do with all this? Vance sat on the edge of the table. 3 months ago, Lieutenant Ryan Hughes was recruited by the FBI after discovering compromising documents in his uncle's personal files. He agreed to be our informant. Colonel Hughes discovered or suspected his nephew's betrayal and planned that lesson during graduation. So the shot was really meant for Ryan. I confirmed, not to kill him, but to scare him. Exactly. But when you were shot instead of him, and especially after the colonel admitted his involvement to you, the plan changed. You became a liability that needed to be eliminated. And Ryan realized his uncle was going to go further than he'd imagined. Why are you telling me all this? What do you want from me? Your testimony is valuable, but it's not everything, Vance replied. We need someone on the inside, someone above suspicion, someone Colonel Hughes would never consider a threat. Wait, you want me to be a double agent? Against a man who already tried to kill me once? Technically, she'd be an undercover agent working for the FBI and the Military Justice Department, Vance corrected. And yes, we understand the risks, so the decision is entirely yours. If you prefer, we can keep you in witness protection until the case is concluded. I looked again at the map on the wall, at the connections that linked military officers to politicians, businessmen, and foreign figures. If this network is as powerful as you say, why do you think you can take it down? I asked. Because we've never had someone like Ryan on our side before, Vance replied. And because they made a crucial mistake. They left physical evidence when they tried to hit you. This is the first time in decades we've had anything concrete against them. I thought of my parents, of the sacrifices they made to give me a life in America, of my belief in the system I swore to uphold. I thought of the cadets who would come after me, who might become pawns in deadly power games if I accept. What would be my next steps? Vance smiled. First, you will survive your original mission. Colonel Hughes will believe your attempt failed. Then, with Ryan's help, we will create a narrative that will make him believe you can be useful to him, that you can be recruited to his side. He would never believe that. Not after what happened. That's the beauty of the plan, Vance said. You won't appear as yourself, at least not at first. 2 weeks later, I returned to Fort Benning as Lieutenant Alexandra Maria, name coined from my middle name and my mother's last name. My hair was shorter and dyed a lighter brown. Blue contact lenses completed the transformation. The official story was that I had been transferred from Fort Hood to assist in implementing new training protocols. Phil knew that Daniela Cerez had been declared dead in an accident during transport to Fort Bragg. The plan was meticulous. Gradually, I would be placed in Colonel Hughes's path, demonstrating skills and attitudes that would catch his eye. Ryan, returning to regular duty, would discreetly recommend my work to his uncle, suggesting that I had the right profile for special projects. Martinez was the only one at Fort Benning who knew my true identity, serving as my direct contact with Vance and the FBI team. For the first few weeks, I kept a low profile, performing my duties exemplarily but discreetly. Gradually, I began to insert carefully crafted comments into conversations with other officers, small critiques of military bureaucracy, suggestions that sometimes the rules hinder more than they help, insinuations that I admired officers who did what was necessary, even when unpopular. My first real encounter with Colonel Hughes occurred during a training review. He unexpectedly walked into the briefing room where I was, presenting new urban combat tactics. Interesting approach, Lieutenant, he commented when I finished. Unconventional, but effective. Where have you served before? Fort Hood, sir, I replied, keeping my gaze steady. But I did an exchange with British Special Forces before that. He raised his eyebrows in interest. Come to my office tomorrow at 16 o'clock. I'd like to hear more about these tactics. It was exactly what we expected. The first step of the hook had been cast. The next day, in his office, the colonel was surprisingly cordial. We discussed military tactics, counterinsurgency doctrine, and my experience with British forces carefully fabricated by the FBI to withstand cursory scrutiny. You know, Lieutenant Moray, I'm impressed, he said, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He offered me a glass, which I politely declined. You seem to understand something few young officers do these days. What would it be, sir? That real war doesn't just happen on the battlefield. It happens in rooms like this, where real decisions are made. He assessed me with those piercing eyes. What do you think of our Army's current chain of command? It was a test question, I knew. Vance had trained me for this moment. I think it's diluted, sir, I replied carefully. Too many unnecessary links between the doer and the one who truly understands what's at stake. A slow smile formed on his lips. Go on. Historically, sir, America's greatest military victories have come when field commanders had real autonomy. Now, we have to go through 7 levels of approval for decisions that should be made in seconds. And to whom do you attribute this? Dilution? Politicians who have never seen combat. Bureaucrats concerned with public relations rather than military effectiveness. And ... I hesitated as if afraid of going too far. Don't hold back, Lieutenant. We're just talking. And a new generation of officers trained to be administrators, not warriors, I added. With all due respect, sir. Hughes tapped the table lightly, satisfied. Exactly. He stood walking to the window. You know, Moray, there is a select group of officers and staff who share this vision. People committed to restoring true American military strength and purpose. That sounds intriguing, sir. We're always looking for young talent. Officers who understand the realities beyond official directive. He turned to me. Perhaps you could participate in some off-the-record discussions in the coming week. It would be an honor, Colonel. As I left the office, my heart was pounding. The lure had worked. I was entering Colonel Hughes's inner circle, the first step toward unraveling Operation Patriot. That night, in a discreet meeting off base, I reported the developments to Martinez and, by secure phone, to Agent Vance. That night, in a discreet meeting off base, I reported the developments to Martinez and, by secure phone, to Agent Vance. He bit faster than we expected, Vance commented. That's good, but also worried. It suggests they're accelerating some plan. What do we know about their next actions? I asked. Martinez and Vance exchanged information about the group's recent movements. Apparently, several strategic officer transfers had taken place in recent weeks, positioning the colonel's allies in key bases across the country. We believe they're gearing up for something big, Vance explained, possibly related to the next round of Department of Defense budget allocations, or something more sinister, Martinez added. There are rumors about an operation called Sentinel Protocol that the colonel mentioned in private conversations. What would that be? I asked. We don't know exactly, Vance replied. But partial documents Ryan was able to access suggest a contingency plan to ensure continuity of military command in the event of undue civilian interference. A chill ran down my spine. This sounds like planning for a military coup. It wouldn't go that far, Martinez mused. It would be more of a selective takeover of certain aspects of the chain of command, making the Department of Defense more independent of civilian control in certain areas, which is still unconstitutional, Vance added, and potentially catastrophic for our democracy. In the following weeks, my closeness with Colonel Hughes's circle intensified. I was invited to informal meetings with other officers, all carefully selected, all sharing similar views on the need for a profound reform of the military command structure. At one of these meetings in a remote house outside Columbus, I met Brigadier General Warren Hastings, one of Hughes's main allies in Operation Patriot. According to Vance, Morai is a promising addition. Hughes introduced. He thinks like us. Hastings assessed me with cold eyes. You served under Martinson at Hood, didn't you? It was a trick question. Colonel Martinson was known for his strict adherence to the chain of command and the Constitution. I served under your command, sir, but not necessarily following your philosophy, I replied carefully. Hastings smiled. Well said. We are at a critical moment in the history of our armed forces, Lieutenant. We need officers who understand the difference between blind loyalty and loyalty to the true mission of the armed forces. What would it be? ... Protect the United States by any means necessary, he responded, even when civilian politicians with no military experience compromise that capability for their agendas. The meeting continued with discussions of necessary reforms and a return to traditional military values, beneath the surface of patriotism and concern for military effectiveness. I perceived a disturbing reality. This group sincerely believed they knew better than elected civilian leaders how to direct fundamental aspects of national defense. As I left, Hughes asked me to stay a moment. You impressed, Hastings, he commented. It's not easy. Thank you, sir. There's a more important meeting in 2 weeks. A planning retreat. I'd like you to attend. It would be an honor, sir. One thing more, he added, his tone casual but his eyes intense. You remind me of someone. I can't quite put my finger on who. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. I have one of those ordinary faces, sir. People always say that. He continued to watch me for a moment. Perhaps. In any case, I'll send you the details of the meeting soon. It's an opportunity to meet the people who really move the wheels of this country. The next morning, while supervising a shooting exercise, I felt a presence beside me. It was Ryan Hughes, Lieutenant Morier, he said formally, loud enough to be heard by the nearby cadets. Impressive accuracy from your marksman. Thank you, sir, I replied in the same tone. As the cadets walked away, he spoke quietly. My uncle is doing extensive research on you. He's had a contact at the NSA run a background check on you. Will the cover hold? I asked, keeping my eyes on the firing range. For now. But he's suspicious. He has an instinct for detecting lies. How long until the roof collapses? Hard to say. A week? Maybe 2. We need to accelerate the plan. The retreat he mentioned? That's where they'll discuss the final details of the Sentinella Protocol. Any news on what it is exactly? Ryan hesitated. I managed to access some more documents. It's worse than we thought. It's not just a chain of command reorganization. They're effectively planning to take control of certain strategic units in a scenario they're calling a civilian leadership failure. What kind of failure? Any presidential decision they deem detrimental to national security. They would establish an alternative command structure, ignoring civilian orders in favor of what they call operational continuity. Jesus Christ, I muttered. This is treason. That's why we need that evidence. The retreat will be at a private estate in Virginia. Several senators and high-ranking officials will be there, along with the group's top military personnel. How will I document it? Vance will provide the equipment, but you will need to be extremely careful. Security will be tight. The retreat was to take place at a secluded mansion in the Virginia Hills, owned by a former Secretary of Defense, now on the board of several arms companies. The week before, I had been outfitted with discreet recording devices, a pen, a brooch, and even micro cameras embedded in buttons on my civilian clothing. Remember, Vance instructed me during our last meeting, we need clear evidence of conspiracy, names, dates, specific details of the plan. Try to get them to talk about the Sentinella Protocol explicitly. What if I get discovered? There is an FBI team positioned 20 minutes away. A code word will activate an immediate intervention, and it will destroy months of investigation. Your safety comes first, Soros, Vance insisted. If you feel you're in danger, don't hesitate. On the morning of departure, I met Martinez briefly. Be careful, he said, shaking my hand and discreetly swiping a small tracking device I'd attached to my watch. They're dangerous, and you're entering hostile territory. The trip to Virginia was uneventful. I was transported on a private jet along with 3 other officers who, like me, had been selected to meet the wider group. No one discussed the real purpose of the meeting during the flight, just general conversations about military careers and politics. The property was impressive, a colonial-style mansion with sprawling gardens and discreet but effective security measures. Upon arrival, we were greeted by our host, Richard Harlow, former Secretary of Defense during the previous administration. Welcome, he greeted us cordially. This is an opportunity for you, promising young officers, to meet people who share your vision for the future of our armed forces. We were shown to individual rooms to freshen up before the formal dinner. I took the opportunity to check that my recording devices were working properly. They all seemed operational. The dinner brought together about 30 people, a mix of high-ranking military personnel, politicians, business people, and some who were clearly from the intelligence community, although they did not identify themselves as such. I was strategically positioned between a congressman on the Armed Services Committee and a vice president of a major defense contractor. The conversation began casually but quickly turned to criticism of the current administration and its excessive interference in military affairs. The fundamental problem, explained the congressman whose name I will keep anonymous for obvious reasons, is that we have civilians with no military experience dictating strategy to commanders with decades of combat experience. We need a structural solution, the executive. We can't rely on the luck of having a president who understands military matters. After dinner, we were divided into smaller groups for thematic discussions. I was directed, along with 5 other officers, to a room with Colonel Hughes, General Hastings, and Richard Harlow. Well, now we can speak more frankly, Harlow began, after the door closed. You were carefully selected because you demonstrated not only military excellence but also clarity of vision. Hughes took the floor. In the coming weeks, an initiative called the Sentinella Protocol will be implemented. Officially, it's an exercise in continuity of command in the event of a massive cyber attack. In reality, it's much more. My heart raced. Finally, they were revealing the master plan. The Department of Defense is currently constrained by a series of inappropriate civilian constraints, Hastings continued. Sentinella is our answer to this, a parallel command system that will ensure that critical military decisions are made by those who truly understand their implications. Wouldn't that be unconstitutional? Asked one of the young officers timidly. Harlow smiled. The Constitution gives the president the title of commander-in-chief, but it doesn't specify how the chain of command should be structured. We're simply reorganizing for greater efficiency. The meeting continued with alarming details. The plan involved the strategic placement of loyal officers in key command, the creation of communication protocols that could effectively override presidential orders deemed harmful to national security, and a system to neutralize internal resistance. What if there is significant opposition? I asked, trying to sound merely curious. Sentinella includes containment protocols, Hughes replied. Any resistance will be quickly isolated and neutralized before it can organize. The discussion continued for hours, with increasingly specific details being revealed. Names of officers already recruited, bases where control was virtually assured, implementation timeline. My devices recorded everything. It was nearly midnight when the meeting ended, with Hastings instructing us, "In the coming days, each of you will receive transfer orders to strategic positions. These transfers will seem routine, part of the normal personnel rotation cycle, but you will be positioned exactly where we need you when the protocol is activated." As everyone began to disperse, Hughes called me aside. "Lieutenant Moray, I'd like you to stay a moment. I have something specific in mind for you." I stood back, feeling slightly uncomfortable under his appraising gaze. "You excelled in these discussions," he commented when we were alone. "Your questions were pertinent. Your grasp of the situation was impressive." "Thank you, sir. I have a particularly sensitive position in mind for you. In fact, I believe your unique skills would be ideal for a special role within the protocol." "What kind of function, sir?" He stepped closer. "Containment team, responsible for dealing with problematic elements within the military itself. Officers who might resist the implementation of the protocol." "I see," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the horror I felt. "Starting with a particular case." He walked to a side table and opened a folder. "This man has been a persistent obstacle to our initiatives." When I turned the folder over to look at it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of Major Donovan, the investigator who had initiated the case against Hughes after the graduation incident. "He's been ... troublesome," Hughes continued. "There remains an unfounded investigation, even after the unfortunate accident with Lieutenant Ceres." Hearing my real name on his lips was disconcerting. "Ceres?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "A young officer who died recently. Irrelevant now." He closed the folder. "The important thing is that Donovan needs to be ... deterred permanently." The meaning was clear. "You're asking me to ... double quotes to do whatever it's necessary for the safety of the nation," he finished, his cold eyes fixed on mine. "It's a test of loyalty, if you prefer to look at it that way." At that moment, I realized I'd fallen into a trap. He wasn't just testing me, he was framing me. If I agreed, I'd be compromised, an accomplice to conspiracy to murder. If I refused, I'd expose my true loyalties. "It would be an honor to serve the nation in this way, sir," I replied, forcing a smile. "When should I proceed?" He smiled, satisfied, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't completely convinced. "Details will be provided tomorrow. For now, rest easy. We have a busy day ahead of us." As I returned to my room, my mind raced. The evidence I had collected was more than enough to warrant arrest: conspiracy against the Constitution, planning assassination, subversion of the chain of command. But I was also now in mortal danger. Hughes clearly suspected something, and the assignment he had given me was both a test and a trap. I needed to contact Vance immediately. I discreetly removed the secure phone hidden deep in my suitcase. There was no signal. I tried the backup emergency device, also no response. The sudden realization hit me like a punch. The property probably had signal jam. I was isolated. A faint noise in the hallway alerted me. I quickly hid my devices and pretended to be getting ready for bed. The doorknob slowly turned. "Lieutenant Moray?" Hughes's voice came from the other side. "May I come in for a moment?" "1 minute, sir," I replied, buying time to completely hide the equipment. I was getting ready for bed. When I opened the door, Hughes wasn't alone. 2 men in civilian clothes, clearly security guards, were with him. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said with false cordiality, "but some matters have come up that we need to clear up immediately." "Certainly, sir," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the internal alarm. "Actually," he continued, his tone changing to something colder, "I think we should discuss this in a more appropriate location." One of the men stepped forward. "If you'd please come with us, ma'am." It wasn't a request, it was an order. I was led through hallways and stairs to what appeared to be a security room in the mansion's basement. Monitors displayed camera feeds from across the property, and sophisticated communications equipment took up an entire wall. Richard Harlow was already there, along with General Hastings and another man I didn't recognize. Lieutenant Alexandra Moray said, his tone now completely different. Or should I say, Daniela Soray? My heart stopped. They knew. It doesn't seem surprising, Hastings observed. That confirms our suspicion. Hughes stepped closer, his face a mask of suppressed fury. Did you really think we could be so easily fooled? That we wouldn't check every detail of your past? That we wouldn't monitor your every move since you arrived in Benning? I remained silent, weighing my options, which were practically non-existent. Your recording devices were detected as soon as you entered the property, the unknown man explained. We blocked the signals, but allowed them to continue running so as not to alert you. What's fascinating, Hughes continued, is how you survived the accident that killed Daniela Saris. An accident I personally organized. Clearly there was a failure of execution, Harlow commented. Something that won't happen again tonight. The threat was unequivocal. Before we resolve this situation, Hughes said, there's some information we need from you. Who else is involved? Who has the recordings you made? Ryan is working with you, isn't he? For the first time since I entered the room, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Alexandra Moray. You can check my documents. Hughes laughed. Your documents are first-class FBI work, but they make mistakes, like everyone else. He tossed a folder on the table in front of me. We discovered an inconsistency in your alleged Fort Hood record, a small discrepancy in the dates. That was enough to prompt a deeper investigation. Hastings leaned forward. Cerez, we're willing to be reasonable. Tell us what the FBI knows, who's involved, and we can reach an agreement. What kind of deal? I asked, stalling for time as I tried to formulate a plan. The kind that lets you get out of here alive, Hughes replied. At that moment, I made a decision. They already knew too much about the FBI operation. If I revealed more, I would jeopardize not only the investigation, but also the lives of Ryan, Martinez, Vance, and others. And there was no guarantee they would spare me no matter what I said. I am Alexandra Moray, Lieutenant in the United States Army, I repeated firmly. And you are making a grave mistake. Hughes sighed. A shame. I really thought you'd be more reasonable. He gestured to the guards. Take her to the storage room. We'll use ... alternative methods. To get what we need, I was dragged down a corridor even deeper into the basement. Storage room was clearly a euphemism for something far more sinister. As I was led away, my mind raced. My tracking device on my watch was still active, but there was no signal to transmit my location. The emergency phone was hidden in the bedroom. I was completely isolated. The room was small, windowless, with only a metal chair in the center and a table with objects that I preferred not to examine. The colonel will be here shortly, one of the guards said, pushing me into the chair. I suggest you reconsider your position until then. Left alone, I quickly surveyed the room. No exit beyond the locked door. No improvised weapons within reach. The room was clearly designed for situations just like this. My only hope was that the lack of communication would alert Vance and the FBI team, but they were scheduled to wait until the next morning to hear from me. Until then, I would be at the mercy of Hughes and his alternative interrogation methods. About 20 minutes later, the door opened. Hughes entered, accompanied by a man carrying a medical bag. Last chance, Soros, he said. Cooperate voluntarily, or my associate here will ensure your cooperation by other means. The man opened the briefcase, revealing syringes and vials of liquid that were presumably some sort of truth serum or other resistance-breaking substance. Do you really think you're going to get away with this? I asked, stalling for time. The FBI knows where I am. If I don't contact them by morning, they'll come for me. This property doesn't officially exist, Hughes replied calmly. And you've never been here. According to official records, Lieutenant Moray is currently in specialized training for states away. And Daniela Saris has been dead for weeks. As he spoke, the doctor prepared a syringe. I considered my options again, practically none. I was trapped, unarmed, and unable to communicate. Then something unexpected happened. A muffled explosion, followed by a tremor that shook the structure. The lights flickered. Hughes froze. What was that? He picked up a radio. Report. Static was the only response. A second explosion. Closer. The building shook more violently. Stay with her, Hughes ordered the other man, drawing his gun and leaving quickly. With Hughes gone, I realized my only chance. The doctor was distracted, glancing nervously at the door. When he approached with the syringe, I summoned all my strength and training. With a swift movement, I kicked his hand, sending the syringe flying, and then hit him in the throat with the side of my hand. He fell, choking. I took the opportunity to seize his weapon, a small revolver he kept hidden at his ankle. I didn't have time to tie him up. Instead, I hit him hard enough to knock him unconscious and ran for the door. The hallway was dark, with only red emergency lights illuminating the way. Sounds of confusion echoed through the mansion's screams, more distant explosions, occasional gunshot. Something was happening, and I needed to capitalize on the chaos. I advanced cautiously, trying to navigate the labyrinth of basement corridors. I needed to get outside, find some form of communication, alert Vance to what I had discovered. I turned a corner and nearly collided with two armed guards. I reacted instinctively, firing twice. One fell, the other retreated, seeking cover. I couldn't stay for a prolonged firefight. Each shot would attract more attention. Instead, I retreated and took another hallway. After several minutes of navigating the underground complex, I found a staircase that appeared to lead to the main floor. At the top, I pressed my ear against the door, trying to assess the situation beyond. The sound of combat was unmistakable now. Not just sporadic gunfire, but sustained automatic weapons fire. The rescue operation I'd expected, or something else entirely. I opened the door slowly, peering through the crack. The mansion's main hall was in utter chaos. Gunmen were exchanging gunfire with Harlow's security detail. But something didn't seem right. The rescuers weren't wearing FBI or any other government agency identification. That's when I noticed a body lying near the main staircase. It was one of Hughes's security guards, but something about his position caught my attention. I approached cautiously and realized he had been executed with a precise shot to the back of the head. Not the kind of casualty you'd expect in a legitimate law enforcement operation. Realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't a rescue. It was a cleanup operation, eliminating witnesses, evidence, perhaps even the conspirators themselves who had become too risky. Crouching behind an overturned sofa, I assessed this. The main exit was blocked by crossfire. The windows were being watched by snipers. My best bet would be to find a secondary exit, perhaps through the back or the garage. As I calculated my next move, a familiar figure came into view. Ian Hughes. He moved with purpose, holding a pistol, apparently searching for something, or someone. I hesitated. Ryan was my ally, but in the midst of this chaos, I no longer knew who to trust. He could be there to rescue me, or to eliminate the last witness. He passed a few meters away from me without seeing me, heading toward another room. I made my decision. I would head in the opposite direction, looking for any viable exit. I crept forward, avoiding windows and open areas. The mansion was enormous, with multiple rooms and hallways. The sound of combat seemed concentrated mainly in the main hall and a few adjacent rooms, leaving other areas relatively safe. After several minutes of cautious movement, I found what appeared to be a service door at the back of the kitchen. Checking that no one was around, I tried to open it. It was locked. I frantically searched for a key, but to no avail. In desperation, I used the butt of my gun to break the lock, making more noise than I intended. The lock gave way after several blows, and the door swung open into the darkness of the night. The fresh air hit me like a blessing. I was outside, but far from safe. The property was isolated, surrounded by dense woods, and I had no idea which direction to go. I remembered that the main road was to the north, so that would be my best option. Keeping to the shadows, I began to move away from the mansion, using trees and bushes for cover. The sounds of combat continued, echoing through the property, occasionally punctuated by larger explosions. I had gone perhaps 200 meters when I heard a noise behind me. Hurried footsteps, someone following me. I turned, gun drawn, ready to fire. Saurus. Ryan's voice was urgent, but low. Wait. I kept the gun pointed at him. Stay where you are. He stopped, hands slightly raised. I'm not your enemy. I'm here to help. What's going on in there? I demanded to know. Clean up. he replied, confirming my suspicion. It's not the FBI. They're private operatives, probably hired by someone within the group itself. Something went wrong, and now they're eliminating evidence and witnesses. How did you escape? I knew the plan. I was warned to stay. Out of the way, he took a step toward me. We need to get out of here, now. I have a car hidden a mile away. I still haven't lowered my gun. Why should I trust you? Because I'm a target now too. My uncle discovered my involvement with the FBI. If they catch us, we're both dead. He held out his hand. Please, Sora. We don't have time. Something in his expression, genuine fear, urgency, convinced me. I lowered my gun and followed him through the dark woods, moving as quickly as possible, while maintaining silence. After nearly 20 minutes of tense walking, we reached a side road where an unmarked black sedan was parked among the trees. Ryan quickly unlocked the car, and we climbed in. Where to? I asked as he started the engine. FBI Emergency Rendezvous Point. About 2 hours from here. He accelerated, headlights off initially as we pulled away down the dark road. I activated emergency protocol as soon as I realized you'd been discovered. How did you know? I intercepted a communication. They found your recording devices. He glanced at me briefly. Are you hurt? Only then did I realize I had several cuts and bruises, probably from the brief struggle with the doctor and my subsequent escape. Nothing serious. Turning on his headlights only when we were a good distance from the property, Ryan sped down the deserted country road. The silence between us was thick with tension and unspoken questions. Who ordered the cleaning? I finally asked. Watching his reaction closely, Ryan kept his eyes on the road. I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect Harlow. He has connections with private security agencies that hire former special forces for discreet work. Why would he order something like that? His own group? Something must have gone wrong, Ryan speculated. Maybe an infiltration beyond ours. Maybe someone close to him was compromised. People like Harlow don't hesitate to cut off Gangrenous' limbs to preserve the main body of the operation. I thought about what that meant. So the Sentinella protocol, it's probably still in progress. Ryan completed my thought. What we saw today was just a localized cleanup, not an abandonment of the larger plan. We drove in silence for a few minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. The occasional lights of distant farms were the only signs of civilization in the dark landscape of rural Virginia. Why did you get involved in this? I asked suddenly. Why did you betray your uncle? Your own family? Ryan was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke softly. When I was 17, my father, the colonel's younger brother, questioned some methods my uncle was employing in an operation overseas. He was found dead a week later. Suicide, they said. But my mother and I always knew the truth. His revelation took me by surprise. So this is personal. It's more than that, he replied. It's about what I believe our military should be about. About the oath we took to protect the Constitution, not subvert it to serve personal agendas. I nodded in understanding. Despite the circumstances, I felt a new respect for Ryan. We continued driving on back roads, avoiding the main highways where surveillance cameras might catch us. Ryan clearly knew the area well, navigating confidently even in the most remote sections. How long until we reach the meeting point? I asked. About an hour and a half now. It's a rural property near Culpap. Safe, discreet. Suddenly Ryan tensed, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Damn. I turned to see a pair of headlights appearing in the distance behind us. It could be anyone, I commented, though my instincts told me otherwise. We're on a back road in the middle of nowhere at 3 in the morning, Ryan replied, accelerating subtly. I don't believe in coincidences like that. The headlights were approaching quickly. Whoever it was driving way above the speed limit. Get ready, Ryan instructed, maneuvering the car to allow more space between us and our pursuers. There's a gun in the glove compartment. I opened the compartment and found a Glock pistol with 2 extra magazines. I checked that it was loaded and the safety was off. The vehicle behind us, now visible as a black SUV, was less than 100 meters away and closing fast. Hold on, Ryan ordered, and suddenly swerved the steering wheel, veering off the paved road onto a dirt road barely visible. between the trees. The sudden maneuver threw me against the door, but Ryan maintained control of the vehicle as he sped down the uneven road. Our pursuers hesitated momentarily on the main road, probably surprised by the maneuver, but soon made the same turn, turning onto the dirt road behind us. "Who are they?" I shouted over the roar of the engine and the sound of rocks hitting the chassis. "Cleaning crew," Ryan replied, focused on driving. "And we're the last item on the list." The dirt road wound through dense woods, barely visible in the headlights. Ryan drove with focused intensity, but the more powerful SUV was clearly gaining ground. "How long until the next paved road?" I asked, keeping my gun ready. "Very. This is a forest trail. It goes for miles before you find anything." A sharp crack and the sound of metal striking told us our pursuers had begun shooting. I instinctively ducked. "I can't compete with them in speed," Ryan said, his voice strained. "I'll have to be smarter." He was scanning the landscape around us, looking for something. Another shot, this time shattering the rear window. Fragments rained down on us. "There!" Ryan exclaimed, turning sharply into what appeared just more dense vegetation. The car bounced over a small embankment, and suddenly we were on another, even narrower trail, almost completely covered in trees. "I know this area," he explained as he maneuvered skillfully. "I used to hunt around here with my father." I looked back. The SUV's headlights had temporarily disappeared, but I doubted we'd gotten rid of them. Ryan drove with a mix of urgency and calculated precision, clearly familiar with the terrain. The trail was almost non-existent in places, and branches scraped the sides of the car as we passed. "Where are we going?" I asked. "There's an old railway bridge up ahead. If we can cross it, we can destroy it behind us." "I destroyed it how?" He gave a tight half smile. "Let's just say I learned some interesting things from the special forces." The trail opened up into a wider area, and ahead I saw the outline of an old metal railroad bridge spanning a deep gorge. It looked abandoned for decades, with rusted rails and rotting ties. "You can't be serious," I muttered, looking up at the rickety structure. "It's stronger than it looks," Ryan replied, slowing as we approached. "And our only chance." Suddenly, headlights appeared behind us. The SUV had found our path. Ryan sped toward the bridge. "There's a backpack in the trunk," he said quickly. "When we're halfway across the bridge, I want you to get it. There's a device inside small with a red button. It's a detonator." "Detonator? You had explosives in the car the whole time?" "Always be prepared," he replied simply. We hit the bridge with a jolt that shook the entire car. The structure groaned under our weight, but held. Ryan drove slowly now, aware of the fragility of the sleepers beneath us. I looked down through an opening at least 100 feet to the rocky riverbed below. When we reached the middle of the bridge, Ryan stopped the car. "Grab the backpack. Quick!" I got out of the car and opened the trunk. The SUV had stopped at the bridge entrance, its occupants apparently assessing the safety of the structure. This gave us a few precious seconds. I found the backpack and opened it. Inside were several packets that I instantly recognized as C4, along with a small remote detonator. I grabbed the detonator and headed back to the car. "We'll continue to the other side," Ryan said. "When we're safe, we'll detonate." He accelerated cautiously, and the car wobbled over the uneven sleepers. Behind us, the SUV finally began to enter the bridge. We reached the other side with palpable relief. Ryan accelerated as soon as the wheels touched solid ground again, and we made it about 100 meters before stopping. "Now," he ordered. The SUV was roughly in the middle of the bridge, exactly where we'd stopped. I pressed the red button. The explosion was deafening. A fireball rose into the night air, momentarily illuminating the surrounding landscape. The central section of the bridge collapsed as if made of matchsticks, taking the CUV with it. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, surveying the destruction. "Come on," Ryan said, already starting the engine again. "The noise will attract attention." We continued driving alongside trails for another 20 minutes until we finally reached a paved road. Ryan seemed more relaxed now, though still vigilant. "How did you know you'd need explosives?" I asked, still processing what we'd just done. "I didn't know. I always carry contingency gear when I'm on duty. I learned it from my uncle, ironically." He glanced at his watch. "We're late for the meeting." I need to notify Vance. He grabbed a satellite phone from the center console and dialed quickly. After a brief conversation, he hung up. They'll meet us at the alternate point. A farm about 30 minutes from here. For the rest of the trip, our contemplative silence hung between us. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by the awareness of how many times we had nearly died in the last few hours. What happens now? I asked eventually. Ryan sighed. Witness protection, probably, for both of us. The evidence we've collected, combined with the documents I have stored, is enough to bring down the entire operation. But they won't give up easily. But what about the Sentinella protocol? If it's still in progress, Van and his team will have to act quickly with the information we have. Arrest the key players and expose the plan before it can be implemented. We finally arrived at a secluded rural property, a modest farmhouse with several cars parked around it. I recognized one of them as a standard-issue federal vehicle. As we stopped, the front door opened, and Agent Vance emerged, accompanied by several armed officers. Her face showed relief at seeing us. "Soros, Hughes!" she exclaimed, approaching quickly. "We were preparing a rescue operation. What happened?" In a nutshell, we recount the events of the night, the discovery of my identity, the cleanup operation, our dramatic escape. Vance listened intently, his face hardening as the gravity of the situation sank in. This changes everything. If they're willing to sacrifice their own limb, they're desperate, which means the Sentinella protocol must be about to be activated. How much time do we have? I asked. Hard to say, days, maybe just hours. She turned to the team. We need to mobilize now. Contact the director and the attorney general. This is top priority. We were taken inside the house, where medics checked our injuries while intelligence teams began processing the information we'd gathered. My recording devices had been lost in the mansion, but I still had the tracker watch, which contained a backup audio of the critical meeting. Hours passed in a whirlwind of debriefings, operation, planning, and secure communications. By dawn, a coordinated operation was underway. FBI team, supported by loyal military personnel, moved to arrest the key conspirators and neutralize the Sentinella protocol before it could be activated. Ryan and I remained at the safe room, exhausted, but unable to rest as we waited for news. The tension was palpable. We knew that if the plan failed, if the group managed to implement the protocol even partially, the consequences for the country would be profound. Around noon, Vance returned, his face showing signs of fatigue but also of restrained triumph. "We've done it," she announced. "The key leaders have been detained, including Harlow, Hastings, and several others. The compromised military units are being reorganized under loyal command." "And my uncle?" Ryan asked tensely. Vance hesitated. "Colonel Hughes was not located during the operation. We believe he escaped shortly before our teams arrived." A heavy silence followed this information. A man like Hughes, with his training, resources, and connections, posed a significant danger while at large. "He'll come after us," Ryan said calmly. "Especially me. Family betrayal is unforgivable in his eyes." "You'll both be under maximum protection," Vance assured, "and we have the full resources of the agency searching for him." For the next few days, we remained in a secure facility as the case unfolded publicly. The revelation of the conspiracy caused a political earthquake. Several high-ranking officials were removed, investigations were opened at multiple levels of government, and the American public watched in astonishment as details of the plan emerged. Ryan and I gave formal deposition, providing critical evidence for the cases against the arrested conspirators. Each day, more connections were uncovered, revealing the terrifying extent of the network. But Colonel Hughes was still at large. A week after our escape, I was transferred to a new secure facility, a house in a quiet suburb, guarded by undercover agents posing as neighbors. Ryan was taken to another location for safety. Life in witness protection was surreal. I had a new identity, cover as a university professor on medical leave, and strict security instruction. I couldn't contact my family or friends. The outside world believed Daniela Soros had died in an accident, and it had to remain that way for now. 2 weeks passed without incident. I began to establish a routine, trying to find normalcy in the extraordinary situation. The agents assigned to my protection were professionals, but they also became almost like companions in that isolation. It was a Wednesday afternoon that everything changed. I was reading in the living room when the secure phone rang, a rare occurrence, as communication was kept to a minimum. It was Vance. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Ryan's gone missing." My blood ran cold. Disappeared how? Left the secure facility without authorization 12 hours ago. Left a cryptic message saying he needed to end this once and for all. He went after his uncle, I concluded. It appears so. We're tracking his every possible movement, but he knows how to avoid surveillance. Vance's voice was tense with concern. "There's more. We've received intelligence indicating that Colonel Hughes may be in your area. We're beefing up his security and considering moving him to another location." After hanging up, I sat in silence, thinking about Ryan. What would drive him to abandon his safety and go after his uncle alone? Revenge for his father? A warped sense of familial responsibility? Or something else he hadn't shared with us? The reply arrived 3 hours later, not from Vance or the FBI, but from Ryan himself. A message delivered by a local teenager, paid to deliver an envelope to my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note. "The game ends where it began. He will be there. So will I. Don't bring the FBI. This is a family matter." Attached was a newspaper clipping about the military graduation ceremony at Fort Benning, scheduled for the next day on the very same field where it had all begun months ago. I froze for a moment, realizing what Ryan was planning. He had somehow contacted his uncle, luring him into a final confrontation at the very spot where the conspiracy had first been exposed. My mind raced, analyzing the option. Should I inform Vance immediately? Surely it was the correct protocol. But something in Ryan's note made me hesitate. "Don't bring the FBI. This is a family matter." But I was part of this too now. And I couldn't just sit by while Ryan possibly walked into a death trap. I made my decision. I wouldn't inform Vance. Not yet. First, I'd go to Fort Benning. I'd see for myself what Ryan was planning. Then I'd decide my next move. The biggest challenge would be getting out of cover without alerting my guards. I spent the next hour planning carefully, using all my military training and what I learned from observing the agents' routines. At midnight, I executed my plan. Using a carefully orchestrated distraction on the house's security system, I managed to escape through the back, avoiding the cameras. There was a rental car waiting 3 blocks away, booked online using a fake ID I'd prepared days earlier, just in case. The drive to Fort Benning was tense. I knew my disappearance would already have been noticed, and that teams would be searching for me. I stayed off major highways, avoided toll cameras, and changed vehicles twice using contacts I'd cultivated during years of military service. I arrived outside Fort Benning the next morning, hours before the scheduled ceremony. The base was abuzz with preparations, with family members arriving and cadets preparing for their big day, wearing a simple disguise, different hair, sunglasses, casual civilian clothes. I blended in with the families arriving for the ceremony. No one would look for Daniela Soros here. She was officially dead, after all. The demonstration field was being prepared exactly as it had been the day it all began. Bleachers were set up, sound equipment was being tested, the tactical simulation area was being set up. A sense of surreal déjà vu enveloped me as I walked the perimeter, searching for any sign of Ryan or Colonel Hughes. I didn't see either of them, but I noticed something disturbing. Security seemed unusually reduced for an event of this size. Fewer guards than would be normal, fewer identity checks, as if someone within the chain of command had deliberately reduced security measures. As the stands began to fill, I positioned myself at a spot with a good view of the entire field. The ceremony would begin in about an hour. If Ryan was right, the colonel would be here. But where? And for what purpose? It was then that I noticed movement on the roof of the administrative building overlooking the field. Just for a second, the glint of metal reflecting the sunlight. A sniper rifle? My military training took over. Without attracting attention, I began moving toward the building. I needed to check it out, and fast. Access to the administrative building was restricted, but there was a service entrance at the back that I knew well from my days at the base. I took advantage of a moment of distraction from the lone guard and slipped inside. The building was nearly deserted. Most of the staff had been assigned to the ceremony. I crept up the stairs silently, moving toward the roof access. The door leading to the roof was ajar. With extreme caution, I peeked through the crack. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. A man stood at the edge of the roof, a sniper rifle mounted on a tripod in front of him. But it wasn't Colonel Hughes. It was Ryan. I pushed the door open slowly and approached. "Ryan," I called softly. He turned quickly, a pistol appearing in his hand before he could blink. Recognizing me, he lowered the weapon, but his face showed a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Cerise, what are you doing here?" "Same as you, apparently," I replied, approaching cautiously. "Hunting your uncle." Ryan turned his attention back to the rifle. "You shouldn't be here. This is between him and me." "Where is he?" I asked, looking at the field below. "He will come," Ryan replied with certainty. I sent a message I knew would attract him. I said I have documents that could incriminate him in crimes not yet discovered, that I will be here to deliver them. To him in person, and you think he's just going to show up? A man wanted by the federal authorities? I know my uncle. He won't resist the opportunity to silence the last witness, especially when that witness is the nephew who betrayed him. I eyed the sniper rifle. "So your plan is to kill him when he shows up?" Ryan didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning the field through the scope. "Justice," he finally said. "For my father. For you. For everyone whose lives he destroyed in his quest. For power. This isn't justice, Ryan, it's revenge." I stood beside him. "And it won't bring your father back. You don't understand," he said, his voice strained. "My uncle never stopped seeing me as a child, incapable of making difficult decisions. Today, he'll find out otherwise." Something in his tone alarmed me. "Ryan, is there something you're not telling me?" He adjusted the rifle's position slightly. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. He'll be here. How can you be so sure?" "Because that's who I would be if I were in your place," he replied simply. One last act of defiance. One final display of power. I looked back at the field below, now almost completely filled with spectators. Families, children, elderly people, all there to celebrate the graduation of their loved one. And among them, possibly, an escaped murderer. And a nephew determined to execute him. "Ryan, we need to call the FBI. There are too many civilians here. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," he interrupted, a clean shot of "no one else will get hurt." I watched his tense profile, and a terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. "Ryan, how did you know your uncle would be in my area when Vance called me?" He didn't answer, but I saw a muscle in his jaw twitch. "What else aren't you telling me?" I insisted. Ryan sighed, finally pulling away from the rifle scope to look at me directly. "My uncle always had a contingency, a last resort if all else failed." He hesitated. "The plan involves an attack during a high-profile military event, something so shocking that it would warrant an immediate military response. The final piece of the Sentinella Protocol." I felt my blood run cold. "You're saying he plans to attack the ceremony? Today?" "Not him personally. He has operatives loyal only to him, people who haven't been identified in our investigation." Ryan returned to his rifle. "That's why I'm here. Not just to eliminate him, but to stop the attack." "How did you find out about this? Why didn't you inform Vance?" "Because the FBI has leaks," he replied. "Someone close to the investigation is feeding information to my uncle. That's how he escaped the initial operation." The magnitude of what Ryan was describing was terrifying. "We need to evacuate the camp now and alert the operatives, make them disperse to attack another day, somewhere else?" Ryan shook his head. "No, we need to catch them in the act. And to do that, we need to let them get close to the target." "What's the target?" I asked, looking nervously at the crowd below. Ryan pointed to a specific section of the bleachers. "VIP, 2 senators, a 4-star general, and the Undersecretary of Defense, all vocal opponents of my uncle's faction within the Pentagon." My military mind began to process the situation. If Ryan was right, we were sitting on a ticking time bomb. But if he was wrong, or if there were more elements he wasn't aware of, we could be walking straight into what Colonel Hughes wanted. "How will the attack be executed?" "I'm not sure," Ryan admitted. "But my guess is it will be during the tactical demonstration, when the weapons are in use and everyone's attention is focused on the field. The same pattern as the incident that originally involved me. History repeating itself on a larger, deadlier scale." "We need backup," I insisted. "Even if there are leaks at the FBI, We can't do this alone. Ryan finally nodded. There's one FBI agent I trust implicitly. The only one who knows I'm here. Martinez. The mention of that name surprised me. Martinez? Is he FBI? Undercover agent for years. He was placed in Benning specifically to monitor my uncle and his... This explained a lot why Martinez always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. How he always knew more than he should. Where is he now? Positioned among the crowd, observing. We have a communication system. Ryan held up a small device in his ear. It's looking for suspicious behavior, any sign of the operative. At that moment, the ceremony began. The military band began the national anthem, and the crowd rose to their feet in respect. I watched closely, my eyes sweeping every section of the stand, searching for anything out of place. Any sign of your uncle? I asked. Not yet, Ryan replied, still focused on the scope. But he'll be here. He's too narcissistic not to watch his grand plan unfold. The opening remarks began. A base commander spoke into the microphone about honor, duty, and sacrifice, words that now seemed terribly ironic given the situation. It was then that Ryan tensed. Suspicious movement, East Sector, he murmured, apparently repeating Martinez's information over the com. I followed his line of sight. At the far end of the stands, a man in military uniform was checking something in a bag. Nothing obviously suspicious, but slightly out of character for the others around him. There's another at the south entrance, Ryan continued, and a third. Hold on. Visual confirmation of the primary target. My heart raced. Your uncle? Affirmative. VIP box, disguised as a high-ranking officer. Hat down, but it's him. I looked where Ryan was pointing. Among the dignitaries in the VIP section, a man in full-dress uniform stood slightly apart. Even from a distance and partially hidden, there was something familiar about his posture. The attack is about to begin, Ryan said, his voice now cool and professional. Martinez confirms the suspects are moving into position. What's the plan? I asked, feeling my adrenaline rise. Martinez has a reliable tactical team in position. When I give the signal, they will neutralize the operatives simultaneously. Ryan adjusted the rifle's sights. My responsibility is to ensure my uncle doesn't escape. Again. My responsibility is to make sure my uncle doesn't escape. Again, Ryan said, his finger adjusting slightly over the trigger. Below, the ceremony progressed to the tactical demonstration. Cadets took up positions on the field, just as they had on that day months ago. History was about to repeat itself, but this time we were prepared. Ryan, I said, my voice calm but firm. Let justice get you. Don't carry that burden. He didn't respond, focused on his aim. Through the cum, I heard him mutter coordinates to Martinez. Now, he finally said. Everything happened with military precision. Undercover agents appeared simultaneously, at various points in the stands, neutralizing the operatives before they could react. In the VIP section, I witnessed the exact moment Colonel Hughes realized his plan was falling apart. He stood up abruptly, his hand moving inside his coat, probably for a gun. That's when Ryan fired. The shot was precise and contained, not meant to kill, but to incapacitate. The colonel fell, hit in the shoulder as officers converged to detain him. The crowd reacted with momentary confusion and panic, but control was quickly restored. Most of those present didn't even comprehend what had actually happened, likely assuming it was part of the demonstration. Ryan lowered the rifle, his face a mask of suppressed emotions. It's over, he said simply. Days later, in a secure room at FBI headquarters in Washington, Martinez, Ryan, and I met with Agent Vance for a final debriefing. The Centinela Protocol conspiracy had been completely dismantled. Colonel Hughes and his key allies would face trial for treason, conspiracy, and multiple attempted murders. What happens to us now? I asked. Vance smiled slightly. Officially, Daniela Cerez will remain dead for now. Eventually, we can resurrect her when it's safe. In the meantime, you two have a choice to make. What choice? Ryan asked. Permanent witness protection, or a new assignment. We have a special unit that deals with internal threats to national security. After what you've faced, you'd be ideal recruits. I looked at Ryan, then at Martinez, who now revealed his true identity as a senior FBI agent. The path that began with a gunshot that rang out during my graduation ceremony had led me to a destination I could never have imagined. "I think I know my answer," he said, feeling for the first time in months that he was in the right place, doing exactly what he was supposed to. Ryan nodded in agreement. "Mine too. 3 years have passed since that day at Fort Benning. The trial of Colonel Hughes and his co-conspirators ended with life sentences. Operation Patriarch, as it became known in intelligence, became a case study in insider threats and the fragility of democratic institutions. As for me, Daniela Soros has officially been reborn with a new mission. As part of the FBI's special unit, I work to ensure that conspiracies like that never again threaten the integrity of our institutions. Ryan has become my partner in this mission, our shared experience forging a bond that transcends mere professional collaboration. Sometimes, in rare moments of calm, I remember that pivotal moment when a gunshot rang out during my graduation ceremony. A millimeter of difference, and my story would have ended right there. Instead, it became just the first chapter in a journey that continues to unfold. As we say in the unit, sometimes it takes a real bullet to reveal invisible threats, and sometimes it's those who survive those bullets who can best defend what truly matters.